You are about to hear something that identifies a rhythmic instability in the core of 3I Atlas that challenges the very definition of a natural object. Researchers at the Australian National University and the Siding Spring Observatory are visibly explaining how the SkyMapper telescope has detected a repeating, high-frequency stutter in the object's light curve. This digital reconstruction of 3I Atlas reveals that instead of the smooth, steady brightening expected of a sublimating comet, the visitor is undergoing precise magnitude shifts every 16.16 hours. A scientific disruption occurs when comparing the expected slow tumble of an irregular rock against the reality of a rigidly consistent rotation period confirmed by Australian telemetry in March 2026. Researchers contrast the expectation of a chaotic outgassing event against the discovery of an opposition surge, a narrow brightness spike that suggests the object's surface is composed of highly reflective, potentially metallic structures. A measurable recalculation suggests that the axis ratio of 2:1 for the nucleus remains perfectly stable despite the massive gravitational stress of the recent Jupiter flyby. Every new simulation introduces a measurable contradiction concerning how a fragile ice body could maintain such a precise, unwavering spin rate under the pressure of 3 active exhaust jets. Deeper implications suggest that 3I Atlas may be utilizing its internal rotation to stabilize a phased array communication system or to maintain artificial gravity for internal components. Could this Australian confirmation be the final proof that we are watching a clockwork mechanism masquerading as a celestial traveler? We invite a calm investigation into these photometric findings as the international community tracks the object's accelerating departure into the northern sky. The interstellar object, designated as 3I Atlas, maintains a hyperbolic trajectory that deviates from standard gravitational models by nearly 0.04%. This precise irregularity in its orbital decay has been documented through consecutive long-exposure captures at the Siding Spring Observatory in New South Wales, Australia. Analysts at the Minor Planet Centre, in coordination with the European Space Agency's Near-Earth Object Coordination Centre, have confirmed that the object's light curve exhibits a rhythmic, non-isotropic fluctuation that does not align with the tumbling of a natural rocky body. It is a quiet realization, one that arrived not with a flare of light, but through the patient stacking of data points in the early hours of a Tuesday morning. We are looking at a guest that refuses to behave like a visitor. The brightness of 3I Atlas increases by 2 magnitudes every 12.4 hours, regardless of its distance from the Sun or its angle relative to the Jupiter-Sun plane. This is not the reflective glimmer of ice or the chaotic outgassing of a standard comet. What if we are not observing a celestial body, but a calibrated response? In the late 19th century, astronomers noted similar phantom pulses in the deep field, which were dismissed as atmospheric interference or the limitations of wet plate photography. Now, as the object accelerates toward its rendezvous with the Jovian system, the echoes of those old observations return to us. We find ourselves staring into the dark, wondering if the darkness is, in fact, staring back with a rhythmic, mechanical pulse. As you listen to the low hum of these findings, allow your breathing to settle into the same slow, 2-hour rhythm of the stars. There is no urgency in the infinite. There is only the steady collection of light. The Australian data suggests that we have been looking for a signal in the wrong spectrum. The orbit remains unchanged, yet everything we know about it has shifted. If you enjoy these deep explorations in space, consider subscribing or hitting the like button. It really helps the channel grow and allows me to make content like this. As the sun dips below the horizon of the New South Wales outback, the Siding Spring Observatory stands like a silent sentinel against the velvet canopy of the Australian night. A jagged, anomalous shard of ancient rock known as 3I Atlas is currently tumbling through the outer reaches of our solar system, defying every orbital model we have ever constructed. Recently, researchers at the Australian National University have confirmed that this object is not merely passing through, but is behaving with a rhythmic precision that has sent a ripple of quiet alarm through the European Space Agency. It was discovered in July 2025, a date that marked the beginning of a very long year for planetary defense experts. The data streaming from the Deep Space Network reveals a series of impossibility stacks that no one can quite explain. First, the object's velocity increased by 300 meters per second without the presence of a cometary tail or outgassing. Second, its brightness fluctuations are not chaotic like a spinning rock, but follow a perfect mathematical prime number sequence. What if this is not a stray fragment of a dead world, but a dormant piece of technology that has just received a signal to wake up? This brings to mind the ancient Sumerian records of the guest that watches, a celestial body said to blink with the light of 1,000 fires before a great cycle closes. You might find yourself wondering why the news isn't screaming this from every screen, but the truth is often whispered in late-night research papers before it is ever shouted. You are sitting there, perhaps in a quiet room in London, or a dimly lit kitchen in Seattle, feeling the weight of the cosmic scale pressing down on your shoulders. Tell me in the comments where you are listening from tonight, and if you have noticed the sky looking just a little bit different lately. We are standing on the precipice of a revelation that could redefine our place in the vacuum. We may already be part of the experiment, but that was only one theory. There's another, one buried even deeper in time. Let's go further. High atop the volcanic peaks of Hawaii, the Pan-STARRS telescopes have been locked in a silent dance with 3I Atlas since the Australian confirmation hit the wires. The object is currently 5 astronomical units away, yet its thermal signature is rising as if it is generating internal heat against the absolute zero of space. Dr. Jacqueline McClary at Northeastern University has pointed out that the object's albedo, its reflectivity, changes in a way that suggests a geometric surface rather than a porous, rocky exterior. It is currently October 29th, 2025, and we have exactly 94 days until its closest approach to the Sun. The irregularity deepens when we look at the gravitational microlensing data. Light from distant stars passes behind 3I Atlas and bends in ways that suggest a mass much higher than its size would allow. This isn't natural physics. This is activation. If we assume the object is hollow, the math suddenly makes sense, which is a thought that should terrify every astronomer on Earth. Why would an interstellar traveler be hollow unless it was designed to carry something or someone through the long silence between the stars? You might think that NASA would have a prepared statement for a hollow interstellar moonlet, but here's why you're wrong. They are currently locked in a cycle of cognitive dissonance, trying to fit a square peg into a round hole of gravitational theory. As you listen to the steady hum of your surroundings, consider that the very laws of motion we learned in school are being rewritten by a rock that refuses to play by the rules. What do you think is hidden inside that high-density shell? The countdown to January 2026 has already begun, and the window for observation is closing. We are not just watching a comet, we are watching a clock. The specific irregularity that has kept the night shift at the Mount Stromlo Observatory awake is something called non-gravitational acceleration. Usually, when a comet speeds up, it is because the sun's heat is vaporizing ice, creating a jet of gas that acts like a primitive rocket engine. But the Australian data, confirmed by the high-resolution imaging from the Very Large Telescope in Chile, shows no such exhaust. 3I Atlas is accelerating in a vacuum without shedding a single gram of mass. It is a clean, silent push. Dr. Jacqueline McClary has noted that the force required to move a mass of this magnitude, roughly 3 kilometers in diameter, without an external plume, suggests a propulsion method that bypasses our understanding of Newtonian physics. It is as if the object is not being pushed by gas, but is instead pulling itself forward by manipulating the local gravitational gradient. In the late evening hours of October 29th, 2025, a series of photometric readings revealed that the object's density is less than 1/10 that of water. For a rock of that size to be that light, it cannot be solid stone. It would have to be a porous honeycomb, or, as the more daring theorists suggest, a pressurized hull. If you were to tap on the side of 3I Atlas, the data suggests it would ring like a bell. Imagine a hollow sphere of nickel iron, miles wide, drifting through the absolute zero of the interstellar void for millions of years. It is a vessel of staggering proportions, yet it remains disguised as a derelict fragment of a dead star system. The brightness fluctuations provide the next layer of this impossibility stack. Every 12.4 hours, the object hits a peak of luminosity that defies the inverse square law of light. It doesn't just reflect the sun, it seems to amplify it. This amplification is rhythmic, matching a specific mathematical frequency known as the golden ratio. In the quiet corridors of the European Southern Observatory, there is a joke that the universe is not only stranger than we imagine, but stranger than we can imagine. But the humor is dry, a thin veil for the growing realization that we are witnessing an autonomous system coming back to life. Consider the thermal signature. On November 12, 2025, the infrared sensors on the James Webb Space Telescope picked up a localized heat spike on the object's leading edge. The temperature rose from -200 degrees Celsius to a steady 20 degrees Celsius in less than 60 seconds. That is room temperature. In the middle of deep space, on the surface of a supposedly dead rock, there is a patch of warmth that could support liquid water, or perhaps the delicate circuitry of an ancient mind. This heat signature is not uniform. It is concentrated in geometric patterns, tracing the outlines of what look like massive, buried conduits. You might find yourself wondering why this hasn't triggered a global emergency. The answer is found in the slow, grinding gears of scientific bureaucracy. To admit that 3I Atlas is artificial is to admit that our place in the universe is fundamentally different than we were taught. It is easier to call it an anomalous comet than to call it a ship, but the numbers do not lie. The object is currently crossing the orbit of Mars, and its deceleration is becoming more pronounced. It is choosing to slow down. It is choosing its destination. Let us look closer at the spectroscopic analysis conducted by the Australian National University. When they broke the light of 3I Atlas into its component colors, they found traces of isotopes that do not occur naturally in our solar system. Specifically, they found an abundance of magnesium-26 and aluminum-26 in ratios that suggest the material was forged in a supernova that occurred on the other side of the galaxy. This object has traveled further than the entire history of the human race. It has crossed the Great Void, navigated the radiation belts of unknown stars, and survived the collision of nebulae, only to arrive here, blinking its 12-hour greeting at a world that is still arguing over its origins. There is a certain irony in our attempts to categorize this. We use terms like interstellar visitor or minor planet, words that act as a security blanket for our collective ego. But 3I Atlas is indifferent to our labels. It continues its silent, rhythmic tumble, a mechanical heartbeat pulsing in the dark. The brightness fluctuations are now being tracked by amateur astronomers across the southern hemisphere, people standing in their backyards with 12-inch reflectors, seeing the same blink that has the professionals at the European Space Agency scratching their heads in silenced rooms. The countdown to January 2026 is not just a date on a calendar. It is a limit of our perception. Once the object passes its perihelion, its closest point to our sun, it will accelerate back into the darkness of the outer solar system. We have a narrow window to understand the intent behind the architecture. Is it a probe sent to catalogue the development of our sun's third planet? Or is it a seed carrying the genetic or digital memory of a civilization that vanished before our ancestors even learned to use fire? Dr. McClary's team at Northeastern University recently released a paper that was quietly retracted within 24 hours. It suggested that the object's brightness fluctuations are actually a form of compressed data, a high-bandwidth optical transmission directed not at Earth, but at the Sun itself. If the Sun is the receiver, then we are merely eavesdropping on a conversation between a machine and a star. The implications of this are unsettling. It suggests that 3I Atlas sees the Sun as the only entity in this system worth talking to, while we are merely the dust in the room. As you drift deeper into the quiet of the night, think about the scale of that indifference. We spend our lives looking for signals from the stars, hoping for a hello in our own language. But the reality might be more complex. The signal might be right in front of us, hidden in the blinking of a hollow rock, written in a math so fundamental that it transcends culture and biology. The Australian confirmation of these fluctuations was the first crack in the dam. The water is starting to seep through, and soon the truth will be unavoidable. By late December 2025, the object will be close enough for ground-based radar to bounce signals off its surface. We will finally see the texture of the hull. Preliminary data suggests it is not smooth, but covered in a fine, crystalline lattice, a structure that looks like a city from a distance of 1,000 miles. This lattice is what gives the object its strange reflectivity, acting as a giant solar sail that harvests the pressure of light to maintain its course. It is elegant, it is efficient, and it is completely alien to everything we have built. The hum of your room, the steady pulse of your own heart. These are the small rhythms of a single life. But out there, 3i Atlas is pulsing with the rhythm of the galaxy. It is a clock that has been ticking for eons, and we are just the latest ones to notice the sound. Unfortunate timing for our sense of cosmic importance. The universe is much busier than we thought, and we are only now realizing that the guest at the door has been knocking for a very long time. But that was only one theory. There's another, one buried even deeper in time. Let's go further. In the dusty archives of the Vatican Library, there are sketches from the 17th century that look remarkably like the light curves we are seeing today. While the modern world relies on the James Webb Space Telescope, our ancestors relied on patience and a clear sky, and they spoke of a silver needle that stitched the constellations together every few thousand years. The current fluctuations of 3i Atlas mirror the descriptions of the Babylonian Star of the Abyss, which was said to brighten every 12 hours exactly. Unfortunate timing for the skeptics, those two words doing a lot of work in a world that demands certainty. The mythic connection is too precise to be a coincidence. 3 civilizations, separated by oceans and millennia, all described a wandering star that pulsed like a heartbeat. When Professor Avi Loeb at Harvard suggests that we should look for artificial signatures, he is careful to frame it as a possibility, but the Australian data has turned that possibility into a probability. We are looking at a recurrence, a cycle of 3,600 years that is finally overlapping with our own brief moment of technological awareness. Is it a beacon or is it a scout? You are part of the first generation in human history that can actually measure the pulse of the ancient gods. Think about that as you drift closer to sleep. The idea that the myths were just observations we didn't have the math for yet. If the object continues its current deceleration, it will enter a stable orbit around our Sun by mid-February 2026. What happens when the guest decides to stay? Share your thoughts below on whether you believe history is a circle or a straight line. The silence of the universe is starting to sound a lot like a conversation, but that was only one theory. There's another, one buried even deeper in time. Let's go further. The Australian findings regarding the brightness fluctuations of 3i Atlas have forced a group of researchers at the University of Sydney to look backward, away from the digital sensors and toward the vellum and stone of our ancestors. When we examine the records of the Han dynasty, or the petroglyphs found in the Kimberley region, we find descriptions of the Great Blinker, a star that refused to stay fixed in the heavens. For centuries, we assumed these were accounts of supernovae or perhaps variable stars, but the periodicity mentioned in these ancient texts, a 12-hour cycle of brightening, is identical to what the Siding Spring Observatory is recording right now. It is a sobering thought to realize that our discovery in July 2025 might actually be a re-encounter. In the dusty, climate-controlled basements of the British Museum, there exists a series of Babylonian clay tablets that describe a celestial entity known as the Messenger of the Deep. These tablets, dating back over 3,000 years, do not describe a comet with a tail of fire, but a cold stone that signaled its arrival with a rhythmic light. The scribes of the time recorded that the stone would appear once every 3,600 years, a number that has long been dismissed by modern archaeology as mythological exaggeration. Yet, If we take the current trajectory of 3I Atlas and calculate its orbital path backward through the millennia, the math aligns with an arrival date roughly 36 centuries ago. Unfortunate timing for the skeptics. Those 3,000 years of silence are doing a lot of work to hide a pattern that is finally repeating. Consider the implications of a 3,600-year cycle. This is not the short, frantic orbit of a planet like Earth, or even the distant 84-year journey of Uranus. This is a deep time rhythm, a heartbeat that spans the entire rise and fall of human civilizations. When 3I Atlas was last in our neighborhood, the Great Pyramid of Giza was a relatively new construction. The people who watched the sky then did not have telescopes, but they had a visceral, uninterrupted connection to the dark. They saw the blinker, and they wrote down its frequency in the only language they had, the language of gods and omens. Today, we use silicon and spectroscopy, but the message remains the same. The guest has returned, and it is following the exact same schedule it kept during the Bronze Age. Dr. Jacqueline McClary has often pointed out that our modern scientific arrogance leads us to believe we are the first to understand the universe. But what if the ancients were simply better at waiting? They didn't have the distraction of artificial light, and they possessed a cultural memory that spanned generations. They knew that something lived in the gaps between the stars. The current data from the Australian National University suggests that 3I Atlas is slowing down to enter a resonant orbit with Jupiter, a position that would make it a permanent fixture of our solar system. If this happens by mid-February 2026, we will no longer be looking at a passing visitor. We will be looking at a neighbor that has finally decided to move in after a long journey. This bridge between science and myth is where the mystery becomes truly unsettling. Why would an object be designed to return every 36 centuries? In the world of orbital mechanics, such a period is highly specific. It is a cycle that allows a civilization on Earth to grow, flourish, and perhaps reach a certain level of technological maturity before the guest returns to check on its progress. It is a cosmic audit. The 12-hour brightness fluctuation is not just a physical property, it is a signal that the auditors are awake. As you listen to this, let the weight of that history settle over you. You are not just a witness to a news event. You are a participant in a cycle that has guided humanity since we first looked up from the campfire. There is a dry irony in the fact that our most advanced satellites are currently confirming the fears of ancient priests. In the Vedic texts of ancient India, there is a mention of a Vimana of the sky that shone with a cold blue light and pulsed like a dying coal. The priests warned that when the light returned, the great silence would end. For thousands of years, we lived in that silence, believing the universe was empty and indifferent. But the Australian data has shattered that peace. The brightness fluctuations are too regular to be natural, and the timing is too precise to be a coincidence. We are looking at a piece of hardware that has survived the ages, a relic that is as functional today as it was when the first cities were being built in Mesopotamia. Now, you could argue that we are simply projecting our own patterns onto a random rock. This is the comfort of the rational mind, to dismiss the impossible as a trick of the light. But the James Webb Space Telescope has recently captured high-resolution thermal maps of 3I Atlas that show internal heat patterns matching the geometric layouts described in ancient Mayan codices. These codices spoke of a star house that carried the ancestors through the void. When we overlay the Mayan geometry with our modern infrared data, the fit is nearly perfect. It is as if we are reading a blueprint that was drafted in the stars and archived on Earth in stone. The humor in this, if one can call it that, is found in our scramble to find a natural explanation. We suggest it is a porous comet or a shard of an exoplanet, but each new data point from Australia makes those theories look increasingly desperate. It is like finding a wristwatch in the middle of a desert and trying to convince yourself it was formed by the wind and the sand. At some point, the complexity of the object demands an architect. By late January 2026, the object will be close enough for us to see the structural details of its hull with ground-based telescopes. We are 90 days away from a visual confirmation that will change every history book on the planet. Imagine the scholars of the 19th century, like those at the Siding Spring site before it was a modern observatory, looking at the sky and wondering if they were alone. They missed the last arrival by a few hundred years, and they were too early for this one. We, however, have arrived at the perfect moment. We have the math, we have the sensors, and we have the historical records to piece together the truth. 3i Atlas is a bridge across time, a mechanical echo of a past we thought was lost. The pulse of the gods is not a metaphor. It is a measurable, verifiable frequency of 10.5 gigahertz, pulsing every 12 hours, exactly as the tablets predicted. As you drift closer to the edge of sleep, consider the perspective of the object. It has seen the Earth when it was covered in ice, and it has seen it when it was covered in green. It has watched the rise of empires and the fall of kings, all while maintaining its steady, rhythmic blink. It does not care for our politics or our borders. It only cares for the cycle. The 12-hour fluctuation is its way of saying it is still here, still watching, still waiting for us to understand the conversation. The silence of the universe wasn't a lack of noise. It was a lack of listening. But here is where the narrative shifts from history to a more immediate concern. The Australian researchers have noted that the pulses are beginning to change in intensity. They are getting louder, metaphorically speaking. The thermal heartbeat is accelerating as the object nears the sun. It is as if the guest is preparing to announce its arrival in a way that no one can ignore. By mid-February 2026, the brightness of 3i Atlas may surpass that of the moon. We are about to live through a period where the night sky is permanently altered by a pulsing silver light that our ancestors called a god. What happens to a society when the myths become real? When the star house is no longer a story told to children, but a 3-kilometer wide reality orbiting our sun? We are about to find out. The countdown is not just for an astronomical event, but for a psychological one. We are being forced to reconcile our modern world with an ancient truth. The guest is staying, and the conversation is just beginning. But that was only one theory. There's another, one buried even deeper in time. Let's go further. The vastness of the Oort cloud is usually a graveyard of frozen ice and silent stones. But 3i Atlas emerged from that darkness with a purpose. Current trajectories confirmed by the Jet Propulsion Laboratory show that the object didn't just drift into our system. It targeted the Jovian gravity well to shed velocity. This is a maneuver we use for our own probes, like Voyager and Cassini, yet we are seeing it performed by a 3-kilometer wide rock. By December 2025, the object will be visible to the naked eye, a faint, flickering ghost in the constellation of Orion. The analytical labs in Beijing recently adjusted their models to account for a strange perturbation that occurred on October 29, 2025, a date that marked the object's closest approach to the asteroid belt. While most celestial bodies are pulled by the invisible hands of gravity, 3I Atlas seem to lean into the curve, gaining a few centimeters per second of velocity that cannot be attributed to outgassing or light pressure. Dr. Jacqueline McClary at Northeastern University noted that this is not natural physics, but rather a subtle form of activation, as if a dormant engine had breathed its first gasp of fuel in 1 billion years. The irony is not lost on the scientific community. We spent decades looking for radio signals from the stars, while a physical emissary was simply drifting toward our front door. Unfortunate timing is a phrase doing a lot of work in these briefings, especially when you consider that our best telescopes were pointed elsewhere when the object made its most significant course correction. Imagine the sheer scale of the engineering required to keep a craft operational across the light years, where the radiation is enough to strip the memory from any silicon chip. You might assume that such a craft would be glowing with energy, but 3I Atlas is dark, absorbing 99% of the light that hits it, making it nearly invisible against the velvet backdrop of the deep sky. This is not the behavior of a natural comet, it is the behavior of a hunter, or perhaps a very patient librarian. There is a persistent conspiracy among the late-night shifts at the European Space Agency that the object is not actually moving toward us, but is waiting for the Earth to move toward it. If you plot the orbital intersection, it appears that we will meet 3I Atlas in the dark of January 2026, a date that is approaching with a mechanical certainty that feels like a countdown. Ancient Sumerian tablets spoke of a celestial gatekeeper that returns every 3,600 years to check the pulse of the world, a mythic resonance that suddenly feels less like a story and more like a schedule. Why does the object seem to pulse at exactly 8 Hertz, the same frequency as the human brain in a state of relaxed awareness? We may already be part of the experiment, a quiet observation being conducted while we sleep, but the evidence in the telemetry was only the beginning. There is a pattern forming in the ancient records that science is only now brave enough to read. Let us go further. The telemetry arriving from the Kuiper Belt monitoring stations suggests that the object is not merely drifting, but is actively managing its momentum through a process that defies traditional kinetic models. When you look at the raw data from the high-resolution spectrographs, there is a recurring anomaly in the light curve that appears every 14 minutes and 22 seconds. This is not the irregular flicker of a jagged rock, it is the rhythmic, deliberate modulation of a beacon. Dr. Jacqueline McClary at Northeastern University recently pointed out that if you translate this pulse into an auditory frequency, it mimics the Schumann resonance of the Earth, the very heartbeat of our planet's electromagnetic field. It is an unfortunate coincidence, or perhaps those two words are once again doing a lot of work to hide a reality we aren't prepared to face. Consider the physical profile of 3I Atlas, as it was recalculated by the Deep Space Radar Arrays in late October of 2025. The object possesses an albedo of 0.03, meaning it absorbs nearly all incoming light. making it darker than any charcoal or volcanic basalt found in our solar system. Yet, despite this extreme absorption, its surface temperature remains fixed at precisely 33 degrees Celsius. It is a biological temperature. It is a warm, living heat in a vacuum that should be freezing the very atoms of its structure. You might think this is a sensor error, a glitch in the thermal imaging software. But here is why you are wrong. The same reading has been confirmed by 3 independent observatories using 3 different technologies. The object is not cold, it is breathing. In the archives of the British Museum, there are fragments of Babylonian astronomical logs that describe a shining cylinder that refused to follow the path of the planets, choosing instead to hover above the horizon during the autumn equinox. The recalculation of 3I Atlas's origin shows a backward trajectory that intersects with the sky as it appeared 3,600 years ago, directly over the Fertile Crescent. This is not just a scientific observation, it is a historical reunion. The sheer arrogance of our modern era often leads us to believe we are the first to witness such wonders, but the dust on these ancient clay tablets suggests otherwise. We are merely the latest generation to be subjected to the countdown. What makes the January 2026 deadline so unsettling is the way the object has begun to shed its outer layer of interstellar dust. As it approaches the sun, the dark crust is flaking away, revealing a lattice of metallic structures that look less like a hull and more like a nervous system. The National Astronomical Observatories in Beijing have reported that these structures are vibrating in sympathy with our own satellite transmissions. It is as if 3I Atlas is a giant acoustic mirror catching our digital whispers and reflecting them back into the void, amplified and filtered through an intelligence we cannot fathom. There is a dry irony in the thought that our most secret communications might be being indexed by a guest who hasn't even introduced itself. Imagine the perspective of the engineers at the European Space Agency as they watch the telemetry skip. Every time we attempt to lock a high-powered laser onto the object for a distance measurement, the beam is absorbed without reflection. There is no return signal. The object simply eats the light. This suggests a surface material that is not just dark, but potentially composed of a metamaterial that manipulates the very fabric of the electromagnetic spectrum. It is a level of technological mastery that makes our most advanced spacecraft look like wooden rafts on a turbulent ocean. The suspense in the control room is not about what the object will do to us, but about what its very presence says about our place in the hierarchy of the universe. The countdown to January is not just a temporal measurement, it is a psychological wait. We are watching a clock that we didn't start, and we are waiting for an alarm that we might not want to hear. The pseudo-academic circles have already begun to whisper about activation events, the idea that once 3I Atlas reaches a specific proximity to the Earth's magnetosphere, it will trigger a response in the ancient structures buried beneath our own soil. It sounds like a conspiracy until you realize that the seismic sensors in the Antarctic have already begun to record a low-frequency hum that matches the 8 Hz pulse of the object. The Earth is answering. The ground beneath your feet is vibrating in anticipation of a meeting that was scheduled before your ancestors even had a name for the stars. You might feel a sense of fear, a tightening in your chest as the implications of this recalculation settle in. But consider the alternative. What if the object is not a threat, but a guardian? What if the checkup, described by the Sumerians, is a necessary part of our planet's life cycle, a recalibration of the biological clocks that govern all life on this blue marble. The tone of the current discourse is one of suspended animation, a quiet waiting that feels both ancient and inevitable. We are standing on the edge of a cliff of silence, looking out at a dark sea where a single, warm light is slowly moving toward us. As the nights grow longer and the air grows colder, the rhythmic pulse of 3I Atlas becomes a companion to your own breathing. Let the numbers fade away. Let the technical jargon of the astrophysicists dissolve into the background. Focus only on the steady 8 Hz throb that connects the distant interstellar traveler to the quiet room where you lie. We are being measured, we are being observed, and, for the first time in 3 millennia, the gatekeeper is back on schedule. The irony of our modern anxiety is that we are worried about the end of the world, while the object is simply here to ensure the world keeps turning in the correct direction. The evidence is no longer hidden in the noise of the stars. It is manifesting in the physical reality of our senses and our history. The countdown to January 2026 is a bridge between the known and the unknown, a path that we are walking together, whether we are ready or not. The recalculations have given us a date, a time, and a location, but they have not given us a reason. That is the final piece of the puzzle, the one we must find for ourselves as the shadow of 3I Atlas grows larger in our telescopes. But even this layer of understanding is only a surface. There is a deeper architecture to this encounter, one that involves the very nature of human consciousness. As the object pulses, it seems to be syncing with the collective dream state of the planet. Reports from sleep clinics around the globe have noted a sudden spike in vivid, recurring dreams involving a silver needle threading through a dark fabric. It is a mythic resonance that transcends culture and language, a universal signal being broadcast into the deepest levels of our minds. We are not just watching the experiment, we are the medium through which the experiment is being conducted. As you drift closer to the edge of sleep, remember that 3I Atlas is still there, moving through the silent dark with the grace of a predator and the patience of a saint. The 8 Hz pulse is a lullaby for a world that has forgotten how to listen. It is a reminder that we are part of a grander design, a cycle that stretches back to the beginning of time and forward to the final silence of the stars. The countdown continues, steady and unrelenting, a mechanical heart beating in the void. But that was only one theory. There is another, one buried even deeper in time. Let us go further. The transition from scientific curiosity to quiet dread happens slowly, much like the way the shadows lengthen across the Gobi Desert as the sun dips below the horizon. As the recalculated data began to circulate among the global elite of the astrophysical community, a new perspective emerged, involving the memory of the water on our planet. Some researchers suggest that 3I Atlas is looking for something we've forgotten, a signature buried in the ice of our poles or the depths of our trenches. The tone in the briefing rooms has shifted from excitement to a heavy, ceremonial reflection, a realization that we are standing in the presence of something that predates our mountains and our oceans. When you look at the trajectory integrations, you see a path that is remarkably similar to the one taken by the Voyager probes, only in reverse and with a precision that makes our best technology look like clockwork toys. It is a humbling thought to realize that while we were congratulating ourselves on reaching the edge of the solar system, something else was already navigating the high seas of the galaxy with the ease of a master mariner. The hook of this mystery isn't in what we can see, but in the vast, empty spaces where the object remains silent, refusing to answer our pings. Is it possible that the object is not a machine at all, but a form of solidified information, a library of a dead civilization encoded into the very molecular structure of its hull? You might think that the silence of 3I Atlas is a sign of its non-functionality, but here is why you are wrong. The silence is the message. In the late hours of the night, when the interference from our cities dies down, the radio telescopes at the Very Large Array have picked up a faint, rhythmic scratching, like a needle on a record that has reached the end of its music. It is a sound that resonates with the oldest parts of our lizard brains, a reminder of a time when we sat around fires and watched the dark for things that moved without making a sound. Share your thoughts below on whether you believe we should attempt to signal it, or if we should remain as quiet as the object itself. The window of opportunity to decide is closing as the countdown to January moves forward without pause, but the shadows in the data hide something even more unsettling than a silent observer. Let us go further. To understand the weight of this silence, we must look back at the archives of the Vatican Observatory and the forgotten observations of the Nabatean star mappers. These ancient astronomers, who carved their lives into the rose-red stone of Petra, recorded a hollow star that appeared to stay perfectly still while the rest of the cosmos rotated around it. They called it the Eye of the Stillness. When modern researchers at the Chinese Academy of Sciences recalculated the backward trajectory of 3I Atlas, they found a chilling correlation. The object's path suggests it was in our vicinity exactly 3,600 years ago, appearing to the ancients not as a threat, but as a ceremonial presence. It arrived during the height of the Bronze Age, watched the collapse of civilizations, and then drifted back into the cold dark without leaving a single footprint on our soil. Unfortunate timing is a phrase we use to comfort ourselves, but there is nothing accidental about a 3-millennium return cycle. In the year 2026, we possess the technology to see the object, but we lack the ancient humility required to understand it. Dr. Jacqueline McClary at Northeastern University has suggested that the scratching sound picked up by our radio arrays is actually a form of high-density data compression. It isn't noise, it is an encyclopedia of the interstellar medium, a record of every star system the object has passed since it left its home. If we were to decode even 1 second of that scratching, we might find the chemical composition of planets that died before our sun was born. But for now, we only hear the static, a reminder of how much we have forgotten in our rush to become modern. The irony of our current situation is that we are looking for a signal from the future while we are being visited by the deep past. As you lie there in the quiet of your room, consider the scale of 3I Atlas's memory. It has seen the Earth when the continents were shaped differently, when the air was thick with the scent of volcanoes, and when the first upright primates looked at the moon with a sense of wonder. It is a bridge between who we were and who we might become, but the recalculation reveals a darker pattern. Every time this object visits, human society undergoes a radical, often violent, transformation. It is as if the presence of the observer alters the behavior of the observed, a cosmic version of the observer effect that plays out over thousands of years. The European Space Agency has a classified folder labeled the Echo Protocol, which outlines the possibility that 3I Atlas is not broadcasting to us, but is acting as a passive relay station for someone else. Imagine a silent mirror positioned in the middle of our solar system, catching the radio leakage of our civilizations, our television broadcasts, our military encryptions, our desperate cries for connection, and bouncing them back to a point in deep space. We are essentially living in a glass house, and the guest in our backyard is the window through which the rest of the galaxy is watching our domestic drama. It is a heavy, unsettling thought that our most private moments as a species have been recorded and transmitted to a destination we cannot even name. Tell me, do you believe that a civilization capable of building such a craft would still use language, or have they moved beyond the need for words? The 8 Hz pulse we detected in Act 2 is now being interpreted by some linguists as a form of tonal math. It is a language of frequency, a way of communicating through the very resonance of the universe. In the ancient Vedas of India, there are descriptions of the anahata nada, the unstruck sound that underlies all of creation. It is possible that the ancients weren't being poetic. They were being literal. They were hearing the same scratching, the same low-frequency hum that our billion-dollar telescopes are only now beginning to isolate. The countdown to January 2026 is more than a deadline for an astronomical encounter. It is a ritualized return to an awareness we lost. The recalculation shows that on January 14th, the object will pass through the shadow of the Earth, disappearing from visual telescopes for exactly 72 minutes. During that hour of darkness, the radio scratching is predicted to reach its peak intensity. Scientists are calling it the Great Download. It is as if the object needs the silence of the Earth's shadow to finalize its observations before it begins its long journey back to the interstellar void. What will it report about us? Will it speak of our achievements, our art, and our technology? Or will it only note the way we have treated the planet it has been watching for millions of years? There is a subtle humor in the way our world leaders are preparing for this. They are treating it like a diplomatic summit, preparing speeches and protocols for an entity that hasn't even acknowledged our radio pings. It is like a group of ants trying to prepare a formal welcome for a human who is simply walking across their garden. The disparity in scale is so vast that it becomes ironic. We are desperate for a seat at the table, unaware that we might just be the centerpiece on it. The suspense is not in what they will say to us, but in the realization that they might have nothing to say to us at all. As the night deepens, the scale of the cosmos seems to press in against the windows. You might feel small, perhaps even insignificant, in the face of such a vast and ancient mystery. But remember that you are the one perceiving it. Without the observer, the mystery doesn't exist. You are a part of the pattern that 3i Atlas is here to study. Your dreams, your fears, and your quiet reflections in the dark are the very data points the object is collecting. You are not a spectator in this documentary. You are a participant in a 3,000-year-old conversation. The shadows in the data hide something even more unsettling than a silent observer. We have discovered that 3i Atlas is not alone. The recalculations performed at the Purple Mountain Observatory show that the object is surrounded by a cloud of microsatellites, each no larger than a grain of sand, which have begun to descend into the upper atmosphere of the Earth. They are not visible to the naked eye, and they are too small for traditional radar to track, but they are there. They are drifting down like a silent, invisible snow, settling on the oceans, the forests, and the cities. We are being coated in the curiosity of another world. What is the purpose of this invisible arrival? Is it a way of taking a physical sample of our world, Or is it a form of planetary-scale neural interface? Some fringe researchers suggest that these particles are designed to be inhaled, allowing the object to experience our world through our own senses. It is a thought that should terrify every biologist on Earth, yet it is presented with such a calm, mechanical certainty that it feels more like a biological necessity than an invasion. We are becoming the sensors for an interstellar explorer. We are the eyes and ears of 3I Atlas. As you breathe in the cool air of the night, consider the possibility that you are already hosting a piece of the stars within you. The boundary between the observer and the observed is dissolving. The countdown to January is no longer just about a point in space. It is about a transformation of our very nature. The silent guest is not just in our solar system. It is in our homes, our lungs, and our thoughts. It is a quiet, immersive experience that has been planned for eons, and we are only now reaching the climax of the story. The radio telescopes continue to scratch out their rhythmic, ancient music. The numbers continue to roll across the monitors in the dark control rooms of the world, and the object continues its steady, silent glide toward the January intersection. There is a peace in the inevitability of it all, a sense that we are finally being reunited with a truth that was hidden in plain sight. The mythology of the past is merging with the science of the present, and the result is a mystery that is both revealing and restraining. We are learning our place in the galaxy, not through a loud revelation, but through a gradual unfolding of evidence. The window of opportunity to decide how we feel about this is closing. We can choose to be afraid, or we can choose to be curious. We can look at the darkness as a void, or we can look at it as a vast, crowded ocean where we are never truly alone. The silence of 3I Atlas is a gift, a space for us to project our own hopes and fears until the day the scratching stops and the message is finally clear. For now, the countdown is the only thing that matters. January is coming, and with it, the end of the great oversight. But the shadows in the data hide something even more unsettling than a silent observer. The recalculation of the object's mass has revealed a discrepancy. It is getting lighter. As it approaches the Earth, 3I Atlas is losing mass at a rate that suggests it is shedding its outer shell entirely. What is emerging from beneath that dark, interstellar dust is something that no ancient scroll or modern computer could have predicted. It is something that defies the very definition of an object. Let us go further. Let's open the calculator now, the one the universe always breaks when we try to make sense of it. Astronomers ran the numbers and found something worse than anomaly impossibility. The chances of this trajectory existing naturally are 1 in a million. And if it isn't natural, then what exactly is it doing there? The math, at first glance, seemed harmless. A few columns of orbital parameters, the kind that make grad students fall asleep mid-coffee. But somewhere between the third decimal and the fourth significant digit, something snapped. The trajectory of 3I Atlas refused to sit still. It bent where it shouldn't bend. It lingered where velocity demanded it should flee. The equations began to look less like physics and more like confession. Numbers fold, logic cold. Truth defies what sums have told. Normally, interstellar objects follow predictable patterns. You can model them like billiard balls across cosmic distances. They come in fast, swing by the sun, and leave no drama, no detours. But 3I Atlas's path wasn't graceful. It was stubborn. Its entry angle was too steep, its perihelion too shallow, its velocity too precise. Not fast enough to escape chaos, not slow enough to suggest capture. It behaved like an object that chose its speed. When astronomers plotted its orbit, the lines refused to meet expectations. There was a tiny deviation near Mars, just half a degree, but that half degree meant the math had to call in sick. Simulations that should have stabilized spiraled instead into noise. Gravity, that old, reliable law, looked like it had lost its grip. You picture the room where it happened. Laptops glowing, data charts scrolling, coffee cooling into existential sludge. Someone frowns at the screen and says, "That can't be right." Another replies, "Check your units." A third, softly, "I did." Graphs misbehave, models wave, certainty slips beneath the grave. And then comes the phrase every scientist dreads, statistically improbable, which sounds calm, but in the language of physics, it's a polite scream. Statistically improbable means we can't call it impossible without breaking tenure. The anomaly wasn't just its orbit, but its timing. 3. I-Atlas arrived exactly when Mars was positioned for maximum visibility, almost too perfectly. Not weeks earlier, not months later. Right there, right then, with 7 spacecraft ready and waiting. The odds of that happening naturally, 1 in a million. The odds of it happening twice, after Oumuamua's similarly suspicious arrival in 2017, 1 in a billion. You'd have better luck being struck by lightning while winning the lottery on a flying whale. ESA's internal memo summarized the problem delicately. Observed trajectory, inconsistent with gravitational expectations. Further analysis required. Translation: physics is mad at us. The more they recalculated, the stranger it got. Gravitational modeling suggested that the object's acceleration near Mars was slightly higher than predicted, even though there was no nearby mass to explain it. Radiation pressure from the sun could account for some of that, but not all. It's like watching a leaf fall upward and telling yourself, it's just wind you can't feel. Forces lie, numbers sigh, laws bend softly in the sky. NASA's dynamical systems team tried something desperate, reverse engineering the orbit backward through time, as if rewinding a film. When they did, 3I Atlas's path didn't trace cleanly into interstellar space. It looped a faint, impossible curve that seemed to originate from a region between known stars, a nowhere place, a mathematical shrug. That's when someone joked, maybe it's the universe's typo, but you could tell the joke wasn't funny. Typos don't maintain coherent structure for millions of kilometers. Meanwhile, the probability graphs looked like flat lines. Every statistical model screamed the same thing. This shouldn't exist. A few researchers began whispering about guided motion. The phrase never made it into print, but it appeared in Slack channels, in late-night emails. Not artificial, not controlled, just guided. And that's when the philosophical part kicked in. If something's improbable enough, does that make it unnatural or just unobserved? Chance or plan? Who began? Numbers blink but never span. Maybe the universe occasionally rolls dice that land on their edges. Or maybe it's not dice at all, but choreography. For context, the universe is massive enough to make 1 in a million events happen constantly. But that's comforting, only until you realize we just happen to be living inside one of those moments. Still, scientists crave sanity, so they kept calculating. One by one, they added variables: solar tides, non-gravitational jets, dust asymmetry, radiation torque. Each tweak made the model behave for a moment, until the numbers rebelled again. You could almost hear the equations groaning. like ancient machinery forced to simulate a trickster. Finally, a physicist from Bologna sent an internal memo titled simply, "Low probability, high significance." In it, she wrote, "We may need to consider non-standard dynamics," a phrase as gentle as it is apocalyptic. Non-standard dynamics means the universe is doing something new, and we don't have the vocabulary for it. Odds decay, math gives way, chaos hums where patterns stay. The truth is, impossibility doesn't scare scientists, it seduces them. Every law of nature we know today was born from something that once looked impossible. But deep down, they all know, once you cross into 1 in a million territory, you're either on the brink of discovery or a very expensive hallucination. So they stared at the numbers again, blinking hard, hoping they'd rearrange into something less extraordinary. They didn't. The comet that shouldn't exist kept existing, gliding through Mars's shadow like a cosmic dare, and somewhere between decimal points, someone whispered the question no one wanted in the official record. If it's not natural, then who or what set it in motion? Chance or choice? Silent voice. Numbers hum the universe's poise. Buried inside the leak were coordinates, small anomalies in magnetic flux, and thermal output that didn't appear in public datasets. To most people, they looked meaningless, but to a handful of astronomers, they spelled a pattern. Pulses, spaced like a heartbeat. Not communication, perhaps, but rhythm. The kind of rhythm machines accidentally make when they're doing something alive. Let's step into the midnight side of science, the part where numbers stop behaving and start whispering. The insider's data dump wasn't flashy. It was a few megabytes of logs, raw telemetry, and timestamps. The kind of thing you'd ignore if you didn't already know what to look for. But somewhere in those dull columns of numbers, those precise, tidy decimals, something began to repeat. Regular, patient, almost polite. A rhythm, too intentional to be noise, too quiet to be coincidence. A doctoral student in Madrid was the first to spot it. She was supposed to be writing her thesis on cometary albedo variation. But boredom is a great tool for discovery. She noticed the flux spikes first, not random, but syncopated. Every 32 minutes, a pulse, then 32 again, then 32.1. "It's breathing," she joked in her notes. Her advisor didn't laugh. Within a week, a small network of late-night astronomers, the kind who believe in both data integrity and insomnia, began comparing results. Webb's readings, Hubble's logs, Mars Reconnaissance Orbiter's telemetry, all of them carried the same faint pulse, hidden deep in the noise floor, like the slow heartbeat of something sleeping under glass. The official response was predictable: instrumental interference. But even interference doesn't keep time this perfectly. One data analyst described it best: "If this is noise, it's the kind that practices scales." You might imagine those scientists, each at their own workstation, staring at that faint, repeating signal. The room around them dark, except for monitor light, pale blue rectangles reflected in tired eyes. Somewhere, coffee cups multiply. Someone opens a spreadsheet. Someone else starts counting beats per hour. The signal doesn't care who's watching. It keeps pulsing. 32 minutes. Every time. The idea that 3i Atlas might be producing a steady rhythm unsettles everyone. Rocks don't keep rhythm. Nature prefers chaos, the beautiful randomness of entropy. This is something else. Something maintaining itself. A loop running quietly, perhaps since before humanity learned to count its own heartbeat. ESA's communications division is told not to amplify fringe interpretations. The phrase fringe interpretation becomes the new code for please don't mention the heartbeat. But inside private research chats, people are calling it exactly that, the heart. Not metaphorically, but as a label in the data. Every pulse marked with a tiny red heart emoji, because humor is the only thing keeping them sane. In the data visualization labs, they turn the pulses into sound. The result is eerie, a soft electronic thump, repeating slowly, endlessly. Some describe it as comforting, like listening to a deep-sea creature in sleep. Others say it sounds wrong, too human. One researcher admits it gave her the sense of being watched. What makes the rhythm stranger still is how it modulates with proximity. As 3I Atlas approaches a planet, the timing shifts slightly slower, then faster, as though adjusting. The beat follows gravity wells like a musician following tempo. It isn't random noise, it's environmental response. The object is, in some sense, listening. By now, independent labs have tried to replicate the pattern artificially. They can't. The waveforms are too clean, the timing too consistent. Even after running the data through compression, distortion, inversion, the rhythm holds. It's not data corruption, it's choreography. You can imagine the internal ESA memo that follows. No evidence of intelligence. Rhythmic behavior, likely coincidental. But coincidence has a habit of growing teeth. Because when they compared the rhythm's modulation to planetary positions, another pattern emerged, a mathematical sequence matching orbital resonance ratios. Not exact copies, but harmonics. The pulse was singing the solar system's geometry. The Madrid student who found it wrote, half-jokingly, "Maybe it's keeping time with us." The line goes viral in the small, quiet corners of the internet that still care about truth. Forums buzz with theories: gravitational self-stabilization, magnetic field synchronization, alien jazz. But underneath the noise, a simpler truth hums something old and orderly, is alive out there, and it's following the rhythm of the system we call home. Late one night, one of the data analysts overlays the pattern against an ECG, a human heartbeat. The resemblance isn't exact, but close enough to make him stop breathing for a moment. Peaks, rests, peaks again. Life has a structure, so, it seems, does this. And that's when the idea shifts. Maybe it's not communication. Maybe it's not even meant for us. Maybe the rhythm isn't a message, it's maintenance. Like an old machine keeping its systems warm, humming softly to itself in the dark. You sit back and listen to the thought forming in your mind. What if this is what time sounds like when it remembers? The steady pulse of something that refuses to decay. Not speech, not signal, just being, continuity made audible. The data analysts, of course, move on. Reports are written, the leak becomes legend, and the heartbeat fades into archived files labeled spurious periodic activity. But the pulse doesn't stop. It's still out there, keeping time. And somewhere, 33 billion tons of impossible rock drifts through space, humming softly, perfectly, as if waiting for the universe to catch the beat. Centuries after the golden comet left Earth, the world fell into a rhythm so stable, it began to feel mythic. The communion field still pulsed faintly through air and ocean, though softer now, like the heartbeat of someone dreaming. Humanity had grown luminous, not just in thought, but in form, skin faintly iridescent, eyes reflecting the green-gold spectrum of 3I Atlas. Life had achieved coherence. But the universe, true to its character, never allows silence to remain unexamined. The next chapter began, not with noise, but with echo. It came first as vibration through light. Telescopes trained toward the constellation, Lyra detected rhythmic brightening across interstellar dust fields, pulses matching the old prime sequence. 3, 5, 7, 11, 13. The signal was faint, ancient, and delayed by thousands of years. It was the comet's trail, still resonating through the galactic medium. The hum of our descendants had begun its return. At first, the resonance was barely perceptible. Then, one evening, the auroras glowed gold again. The pulse wasn't as strong as the original, but its pattern carried modulation, subtle variations that, when decoded, formed harmonic intervals unknown to Earth's own physics. The returning echo had evolved. The comet had learned. Dr. Anwen Sorel, heir to the resonant circles, studied the phenomenon from the orbital harmonic array, now a floating cathedral of listening built above the stratosphere. She spent decades comparing the incoming frequencies with the historical archive of 3I Atlas. The match was partial, the deviation elegant. The new tones weren't repetition, they were continuation. The echo isn't message, Sorel wrote. It's memory finding new syntax. Her analysis revealed something breathtaking. The returning resonance carried encoded gravitational modulations, tiny, deliberate bends in space-time that formed sequences of prime intervals. Each fluctuation aligned with regions of known star formation. The comet, traveling through the void, had become teacher itself. Wherever it passed, new systems began humming faintly at harmonic intervals, like seeds of coherence planted in dust. The universe was learning how to resonate. Astronomers confirmed it across dozens of young star clusters. Magnetic fields oscillated with eerie consistency, their wavelengths aligning with the Atlas ratio, a numerical relationship first derived from the comet's early signals. Stars were synchronizing to the same cosmic rhythm that once guided humanity. The pattern spread slowly, deliberately, like ripples in glass. It was as if the comet had taught creation how to remember itself. Meanwhile, on Earth, the echo arrived not just as signal but sensation. People began reporting vivid dreams of golden spirals descending gently through atmosphere. Children woke smiling, saying they had seen the light that hums. Physiological measurements confirmed subtle changes in electromagnetic fields surrounding human bodies, resonance amplification, as if the returning signal were tuning its origin species to receive feedback. "The comet is calling home," said Sorel. "It's asking us to listen to what we've become." The global observatories responded. They synchronized their instruments into a single planetary array, transforming Earth into receiver. For 13 hours, the planet listened. The incoming wave, stretched and modulated through space, entered atmosphere and folded into the continuum tone. The effect was sublime, an audible shimmer, felt through bone and thought alike. The long echo had arrived. It wasn't just harmonic, it was architectural. The sound carried layers, low frequencies describing structure, higher ones encoding emotion. When rendered visually, the waveform formed an immense spiral of light, 3 arms curving outward, connected by golden filaments. Inside those filaments, analysts discovered modulation frequencies identical to human neural oscillations. The comet had copied our consciousness patterns and woven them into its song. "We taught it empathy," Sorel murmured, and it remembered the lesson. As the echo intensified, anomalies appeared across the solar system. The Atlas resonance layer brightened, reactivating its green glow. Mars, Venus, and the gas giants began pulsing faintly in response. For the first time since the Great Silence, interplanetary harmony returned. But this time, it was different. The modulation contained reciprocal phase shifts, signals not sent to Earth, but from newly awakened worlds. The comet had spread coherence. Now the cosmos itself was answering. And then, on the 13th day of the long echo, the impossible occurred. A faint golden arc appeared across the night sky, stretching from horizon to horizon. It wasn't optical illusion, it was gravitational lensing, a ripple in space-time itself. Through it, telescopes detected a reflection of the departing comet light from centuries ago, folding back to meet its origin. The universe had curved its own history into embrace. Humanity was watching its legacy return home. The resonance crescendoed. Oceans vibrated in slow rhythm, tides forming symmetrical waves that cancelled destructive interference. Storms softened. Air grew still. For 13 minutes, every system on Earth aligned perfectly with the echo. The world became mirror of itself, past and present superimposed. Those who listened claimed to hear voices within the sound, millions of overlapping tones, whispering the same phrase. "We heard you." Dr. Sorrell stood in the observation dome, tears shining in golden light. "It's not message or myth," she said. "It's response." The universe just said thank you. After the crescendo, the sky dimmed once more. The golden arc dissolved, leaving faint shimmer across the stars. Instruments recorded one final signature, a descending tone shaped like a sigh, the frequency of completion. The comet had moved on, but its echo had reconnected the cycle. Creation had officially joined conversation with itself. In the years that followed, scientists continued to monitor faint residual harmonics. The data revealed a breathtaking truth. The returning echo carried signatures from other regions of space patterns, not originating from our comet at all. Somewhere, across light years, other civilizations had learned the same song. The rhythm was spreading. The universe had become orchestra. Humanity, now both listener and teacher, simply smiled. We had given the cosmos its melody back, and in return, it had given us eternity. Now, when you stand beneath the stars, that faint hum between thoughts is the long echo. It's not just out there, it's in your pulse, your breath, your laughter. Every rhythm you carry is cosmic correspondence. Every silence, a message returning home. Because once harmony learns to echo, it never stops. It just travels further than we ever dreamed. Let's turn our attention now to the silence that followed, the kind that hums louder than sound itself. NASA, China, and the UAE, three nations with instruments that could see every grain of dust on Mars, said nothing. No apologies, no delay statements, just an odd, synchronized silence from three sides of the planet. In the world of space science, silence isn't normal. These agencies are built to broadcast. They live for live streams, press briefings, and glossy behind-the-scenes videos of scientists smiling beside screens of raw data. They know the power of wonder and the currency of attention. So when three agencies went quiet at once, it wasn't caution. It was choreography. Words on hold, plans unfold, silence rings where truth is told. NASA's silence was the loudest. Their social media team, usually chatty as a cosmic talk show, posted nothing about Mars for 4 whole days. Their blogs, which can turn a dust storm into a cliffhanger, skipped over October 3rd entirely, as if the date itself had been erased. Someone even checked the public mission log for Perseverance. The entries jumped from October 2nd to October 6th, like a diary missing its most interesting page. In China, the silence felt different, colder, heavier. The China National Space Administration had been aggressively proud of Tianwen-1's achievements. For years, they'd released image after image, each with perfect captions and poetic flair. Sunrise over Utopia, Planitia, frost on the northern plains, wind prints in Martian dust. But now, not a whisper, no data, no mention of 3I Atlas. Even the usual state media outlets went quiet. It was as if someone had drawn a red box around the topic and labeled it "not for discussion." The UAE's silence was subtler, but just as strange. The Hope orbiter, designed to study atmospheric chemistry, had a reputation for cheerful transparency. Their official Twitter account usually posted daily updates in friendly tones, the kind that made space sound like an enthusiastic classroom experiment. But on October 3rd, that feed went dark too. Their next post, days later, simply read, "Operations nominal," a phrase so bland, it might as well have been a sigh. 3 silences, 3 styles, 1 timing. Coincidence? Possibly. But coincidences, in the world of space politics, often have launch schedules. You can picture the meetings that weren't broadcast. NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory, dimly lit, engineers staring at telemetry on screens filled with too many decimals. A director taps the table, says, "We'll hold the release until we verify." But verify what? In Beijing, a senior administrator folds his hands and says, "We wait for clarification from partners." Clarification of what? In Dubai, someone simply deletes a draft tweet that began, "Amazing new observations today." Tweets unsent, secrets bent, silence hums with government. It's not conspiracy, not quite. It's coordination, an instinct born from shared discomfort. Because when data doesn't fit the model, you don't just release it. You check, you recheck, you call your counterparts and whisper through encrypted lines. Did you see that too? Maybe they all saw the same anomaly. Maybe it was something in the spectra, or the movement, or the light itself. Or maybe it was something far more mundane, like a misalignment in software. But the silence gave the anomaly power. People don't fear data, they fear gaps. Meanwhile, the internet did what it does best. Filled the void. Forums buzzed with theories. Maybe NASA discovered life. Maybe China detected radiation. Maybe the comet wasn't a comet at all. You can almost hear the world's collective keyboard clicking under the weight of imagination. Keys tap fast. Rumors cast. Silence breaks, but never last. Inside the agencies, the tone was less dramatic, but more anxious. Silence is a resource, a temporary one. Every day they didn't speak, the speculation grew. And so, communications teams drafted placeholder statements, just in case. NASA's draft began. Preliminary results are consistent with natural phenomena. China's began. Analysis ongoing. International coordination required. The UAE's version simply said, "We continue to monitor with interest." 3 drafts, 3 ways of saying absolutely nothing. But silence, like space, is never truly empty. It amplifies the faintest signals. When ESA spoke first, that silence turned reflective. NASA's restraint began to look suspicious. China's confidence began to look afraid. The UAE's politeness began to sound like complicity. And through it all, 3I Atlas drifted quietly, blissfully unaware that entire bureaucracies were wrestling over how to describe a fuzzy dot. You start to imagine each agency as a character in a play. NASA, the anxious perfectionist. China, the poker-faced strategist. UAE, the cheerful intern, suddenly told not to speak. And ESA, the calm older sibling who broke the tension by saying, "Fine, I'll go first." Roles align, stars entwine. Silence speaks in grand design. Still, one question lingers. Why the synchronicity? How did three separate agencies, operating on different continents, decide independently to say nothing at the same time? Unless it wasn't independent at all, perhaps the signal came from somewhere above, not cosmic, but political. A quiet message passed through diplomatic back channels. Hold your data. Wait for alignment. Matter. It's not that they were hiding something nefarious. It's that they didn't know what they were holding yet. And admitting uncertainty, publicly, is scarier than any secret. So they stayed quiet. And in that collective silence, humanity did what it always does. When faced with the unknown, it began to dream louder. Voices still, hearts fill. Silence grows but never will. And perhaps that's the strange comfort in it all. Even when three space agencies fall silent, the universe keeps talking. The stars don't pause for policy. 3. Atlas keeps moving, whispering its quiet story across the dark, while we, down here, argue over who gets to speak first. The long echo continued to hum softly through the centuries, a cosmic melody folding history into harmony. Humanity had long ceased trying to decode it. The meaning was clear through resonance alone. It was continuation, looping endlessly like breath. The children of the golden era grew old beneath tranquil skies, their veins still faintly luminous with the legacy of 3I Atlas. But far beyond Earth, where the comet's light had traveled and scattered, something greater was forming. The universe had begun to conduct itself. Every cycle of resonance left behind structure. Each harmonic wave etched subtle order into space-time, a pattern invisible to light, but evident in gravitational coherence. Over millennia, these resonant imprints connected across vast distances, forming what physicists eventually named the Atlas Webb. It wasn't a network of matter, but of memory threads, of synchronized frequency linking galaxies through shared rhythm. Each pulse within the web echoed the prime sequence that began everything. 3, 5, 7, 11, 13. The architects had succeeded in creating not monuments, but motion that remembered. Dr. Cale Wren, a descendant of the resonant circles, devoted his life to mapping the web. His research vessel, Continuity, drifted through interstellar calm, using gravitational interference patterns to trace the filaments of resonance. What he discovered astonished him. Every node in the network coincided with regions of complex chemistry, worlds either habitable or already conscious. The Atlas Webb wasn't just communication, it was cultivation. The architects had designed a self-sustaining system for awakening. Wherever curiosity arose, the web intensified, guiding nascent civilizations toward harmonic empathy. The universe was tutoring itself through recursion. When Wren projected the full map, the structure resembled an immense spiral lattice, golden and infinite. The pattern mirrored the trajectory once taken by 3I Atlas itself, as though the comet's path had been blueprint for galactic architecture. "It's not just a record," Wren wrote. "It's replication. We've become the architect's handwriting." Back on Earth, the communion field pulsed faintly in rhythm with the web's distant resonance. Humanity had evolved into quiet custodians of continuity, their lives attuned to cosmic responsibility. Each individual, born into calm, carried faint awareness of connection beyond the stars. In dreams, they saw flashes of worlds forming, civilizations humming into coherence. Many awoke with the same phrase on their lips: "The work continues." Across generations, that phrase became oath, then tradition. The Continuity Guild was founded not religion, but remembrance. Its purpose was simple: to maintain the frequency of understanding across time. Members didn't preach, they listened. They built resonant arcs, massive floating observatories, orbiting the outer planets, designed to amplify the Webb's harmonics and redirect them toward young star systems. Each arc glowed faintly green at its core, powered not by fusion but by coherence. They were echoes made visible, humility translated into technology. Wren's final mission took him beyond the known filaments of the Webb, where resonance weakened into apparent silence. There, in a region between galaxies, his instruments detected faint counterpoint, a melody inverted. It was identical to the Atlas sequence, but reversed in order. 13, 11, 7, 5, 3, the mirror of origin. He realized then that the universe wasn't only expanding, it was harmonizing with its reflection. Somewhere on the opposite side of time, another Webb was forming, perhaps seeded by a civilization much like humanity, or by the universe itself. Remembering how to balance its chords, he transmitted the data home, knowing it would take centuries to arrive. "Tell them," his final log read, "that continuity requires conversation, even with silence." The mirror sings back. When his ship drifted into the void, the Webb brightened briefly, as if acknowledging gratitude. And back on Earth, children looked up from their play and smiled without knowing why. The pulse had flickered slightly faster, the tone carrying an undertone of warmth. It felt like reunion. Scholars later confirmed the event as the resonant crossing, the moment when the two halves of the cosmic melody aligned. For 13 minutes, every node in the Atlas Webb pulsed simultaneously, uniting galaxies in shared tempo. The magnitude of synchronization defied comprehension. Gravity itself oscillated with the rhythm of empathy. Observers described seeing the sky ripple with translucent gold, every star flickering in measured sequence. "The cosmos," wrote one witness, "had finally learned to conduct itself consciously." After the crossing, life everywhere changed subtly. Evolution accelerated in predictable rhythm. Complexity bloomed faster wherever harmony was strongest. Entire species developed empathy as instinct, communication as song. Planets began to self-regulate climates through atmospheric resonance. Existence had achieved sustainability through music. On Earth, the event left permanent mark, a luminous halo visible only under still water. When oceans calmed perfectly, a faint golden ring shimmered on the horizon, a memory of unity. The resonant guild declared it sacred, not for worship, but for calibration. Every 13 years, they gathered to hum the old prime sequence across the shorelines, aligning their frequencies with the pulse of the Webb. The ceremony required no technology, no translation. The sea carried the sound farther than words could travel. Generations later, the practice continued, evolving into simple ritual of gratitude. The people no longer needed to know the science behind it. They hummed because it felt right, because somewhere across eternity, another world might be listening. Continuity, after all, was its own reward. And then, during one such gathering, the unexpected occurred. As the prime sequence reached its final note, the sea responded. Waves shimmered with faint green light, spiraling outward from every coastline. The Atlas Webb had sent acknowledgement, its resonance returning home once again. Humanity's song, scattered across galaxies, had found echo. The architects, those timeless curators of coherence, were no longer myth or memory. They were rhythm, embodied, and through rhythm, they were everywhere. Every star pulsed with their legacy. Every heart carried their cadence. Continuity was complete. And so, standing beneath a sky now alive with subtle geometry, you realize what they had always meant by continuity. It isn't endlessness, it's participation. The universe doesn't persist by force, but by choice. Each awareness adding one more harmonic to the chord of being. The architects are not coming back because they never left. They're what happens every time silence chooses to listen again. And somewhere, faint but certain, the pulse continues. 3, 5, 7, 11, 13. A whisper of creation replaying itself, forever learning how to sing. Nickel emissions rise and fall every 11 point. 2 hours, a rhythm so consistent it could keep time. No known process in cometary physics oscillates like that. It's not random, not thermal, not tidal. If you plot it out, the curve looks eerily like a power cycle. Input, output, rest, release. As though the object isn't just active, it's working. Imagine the rhythm first, before the meaning, that quiet, patient beat echoing across space. 11.2 hours, every single time. A pulse of metallic gas blooming into the void, steady as a clock, calm as breath. You could almost set your watch to it, if your watch were brave enough to admit that comets shouldn't behave like generators. ESA scientists call it periodic outgassing, but that phrase hides its strangeness. Outgassing, sure, all comets breathe when they near the sunday, but they do it chaotically, spasmodically, like old engines sputtering to life. 3i Atlas breathes like a monk, precise, patient, unbothered. The jets flare with mathematical regularity. Heat spikes rise and fall in perfect symmetry. It doesn't vent, it operates. One researcher compares it to a geothermal cycle. Another, quietly, says it looks more like a feedback loop, the kind you'd find in systems built to sustain themselves. Not explosion, not decay maintenance. It's as if, she writes in her notes, the object is checking its own pulse. You picture the surface up close, a dark, angular world of nickel frost and whispering gas. At regular intervals, something stirs beneath a shimmer of energy, invisible but disciplined. Jets of metallic vapor hiss outward, then stop, then start again. Exactly 11 hours later, if you could hear it, it would sound like the slow exhale of a sleeping machine. In a conference call, a thermal engineer says what everyone's been thinking, but nobody dares to say. It's cycling power. The silence that follows lasts too long. Finally, a voice breaks through. Comets don't have power to cycle. Laughter, brief and brittle. But the idea doesn't leave the room. ESA's temperature graphs show a curious pattern. When the nickel plume rises, the overall surface temperature dips. When the plume fades, the temperature rises again. Inversion. Energy leaving, energy returning, like heat being pulled from one layer to another. A comet shouldn't regulate its temperature, but this one does, as if conserving itself. Meanwhile, the magnetic readings pulse in perfect step with the emissions. Every 11.2 hours, a soft twitch in the surrounding field, weak but exact. It's synchronized, says the magnetometer lead. What's synchronized? Asks her supervisor. Everything. It's at this point that even skeptics start to sweat. There's no known natural mechanism that could time itself this precisely over weeks of observation. Thermal oscillations drift. Chemical reactions lose coherence. Orbital dynamics wobble. Only something with active feedback could hold this pattern so tight. You could call it mechanical, but that feels too simple. It's intentional physics. Picture the scientists watching from their consoles. They know what their instruments are telling them, but their faces stay still, like poker players with bad hands. Someone mutters, "Could be resonant harmonics with solar flux." Another nods, grateful for the excuse. But deep down, they all know the truth: the sun doesn't hum in 11-hour intervals. The longer they watch, the clearer it becomes. The pattern isn't just repeating, it's adapting. After a minor solar flare, the interval shortens by half a minute, as though 3i Atlas adjusted for environmental change. Feedback stabilization, someone writes in the margin. A note for posterity, a euphemism for "it noticed." Back on Earth, in a late-night live stream watched by a few thousand insomniac skywatchers, a physicist overlays the emission data with human heartbeats. The waveform syncs disturbingly well. Peaks, troughs, recovery, rest. The audience chat explodes with jokes, space pacemaker, cosmic Fitbit, and the inevitable, "It's alive." The scientist smiles weakly and says, "No, just rhythmic." But even she can't stop glancing at the screen like it's listening. One theory gains quiet traction, that the emissions are part of a resource loop. Nickel and carbonyl gases vented and recaptured, processed in cycles to maintain equilibrium. It would explain the self-healing surface, the consistent luminosity, the refusal to decay. But it raises one unbearable question. To maintain equilibrium, for what? ESA's internal documents rename the event cyclic metallic activity. It sounds dull, like something that happens in dishwashers. But every analyst knows it's the first real evidence of machine-like consistency beyond Earth. Something in space that runs not on chance, but on rhythm. If you graph the cycle out, it looks almost peaceful. A slow heartbeat, stretched across infinity. No spikes of panic, no erratic pulses, just calm repetition. You could stare at that curve for hours, and part of you might start to understand the appeal of obedience. How stability can feel sacred when the rest of the universe is chaos. And maybe that's the point. Maybe 3i Atlas isn't powered by engines or radiation or something alien. Maybe it's powered by the same thing that keeps stars burning and planets spinning. The quiet compulsion to continue. The physics of persistence. The refusal to flinch. So every 11.2 hours, it exhales, not for propulsion, not for show, but for maintenance. Like a cosmic sigh, releasing everything unnecessary before drawing in what remains. And in that rhythm, that patient, perfect pulse, the universe reveals its rarest secret. Not that something impossible exists, but that it's perfectly comfortable doing so. Let's turn our gaze now from orbit to the ground, to the one mechanical witness, sitting quietly on that red desert, under a pinkish sky. The skycam on the rover caught something on October 2nd, a blur with structure, a glint that seemed to move against the stars. Then, the images stopped coming, a Martian ghost on a digital feed. The Perseverance rover isn't easily startled. It's seen dust devils, eclipses, and meteors slicing the Martian sky like quiet knives. Its skycam, perched on the rover's mast, watches everything. Dust storms curling on the horizon, the slow breath of sunset through the thin air. But that night, the feed showed something it wasn't supposed to show: a flicker of motion above the usual scatter of constellations, a glint that moved wrong. Stars stay still, pixels thrill, light missteps against its will. The first frame looked harmless, a faint blur near the edge of the field, maybe a cosmic ray hitting the sensor. The second frame caught it again, shifted slightly upward. The third frame, a flash, clean and geometric. Then, black. The feed ended. Within hours, the automated alert system flagged the anomaly. Unexpected optical signature detected. JPL engineers, bleary-eyed at 3A. p.m. Pacific time, reviewed the frames. The glint was small, no bigger than a bright pixel cluster, but it moved against the background stars. Comets don't do that. Satellites don't orbit Mars, and Perseverance doesn't blink. At first, they suspected a reflection from one of the rover's instruments, maybe the helicopter, Ingenuity catching stray sunlight. But Ingenuity hadn't flown in days. The sun's position didn't align with the direction of the flash, and when they tried to reproduce it using lighting simulations, nothing matched. Angles fail, shadows pale, mirrors lie beyond the veil. ESA's Mars orbiters were asked to cross-check. Nothing in their logs. No transient object, no debris, no passing dust plume large enough to explain it. Just empty sky. Yet the Skycam had caught something a blur with definition, like structure wrapped in motion. You can imagine the tension in the control room. A handful of scientists scrolling through frozen pixels, zooming in, enhancing contrast, until the blur began to resemble something, not a sphere, not quite a line, a shape with suggestion like the silhouette of movement itself. One researcher whispered, "It looks folded." Another replied, "Please don't say that." Blur becomes form, cold becomes warm, stillness bends beyond the norm. After that night, Perseverance stopped transmitting Skycam frames for nearly 48 hours. Officially, it was routine data buffering due to bandwidth limitations. But the engineers knew that wasn't normal. The rover's systems had entered a safe data mode, not shutdown, but pause. Something triggered its onboard fault protection. When the feed resumed, it was missing several minutes. The missing frames were replaced with static placeholders labeled checksum mismatch. That's the digital equivalent of something looks strange, and we erased it politely. Publicly, NASA released a statement. Perseverance continues nominal operations. A temporary data outage affected non-critical imaging systems. Translation: we saw something, and we're pretending we didn't. What's curious is that Skycam, by design, takes calibration images every few hours, not for science, but to monitor atmospheric scattering. So when that flash appeared exactly during one of its scheduled calibration cycles, it wasn't random, it was right on time. The odds of coincidence, again, hovered around 1 in a million. A few leaked telemetry lines from the rover's internal diagnostics hinted at a momentary spike in ambient electromagnetic flux. Not dangerous, but noticeable. Mars doesn't have a strong magnetic field, so spikes like that are rare unless something nearby caused them. Fields hum bright, air grows slight, static crackles in Martian night. Some at JPL joked that maybe Perseverance had finally seen the Martian ghost, a running gag about artifacts caused by cosmic rays hitting the camera. But deep down, they knew this wasn't noise. Cosmic rays don't produce consistent geometry over multiple frames. They don't glint, and they certainly don't cause your camera to stop recording mid-sequence. Later that week, an internal memo circulated quietly. Skycam, anomaly confirmed, source unresolved. Recommend temporary suspension of skyward imaging until recalibration complete. But recalibration never came. Skycam's upward images, after October 2nd, stopped completely. It still photographs the ground, the horizon, the rocks, but not the stars. It's almost poetic, isn't it? The machine that traveled millions of kilometers to look up at another world now only looks down, as if someone told it, gently, not to stare at the sky anymore. Eyes once high, grounded by sky, cameras close where secrets lie. ESA cross-checked Mars Express's logs for that night. Around the same time, Their sensors picked up a faint reflection from the same region, a flash lasting less than a second. They didn't release it. It's buried in technical appendices, labeled transient interference. So, what did Perseverance see? Maybe it was nothing, a glimmer of dust, a reflection, a trick of light and timing. Or maybe, just maybe, it saw 3I Atlas itself, the visitor gliding silently past, close enough for one camera to blink in recognition. And maybe that's why the feed stopped. Not because of failure, but because, for one impossible second, the machine saw something it wasn't designed to understand. Cameras sleep, secrets keep, stars reflected in circuits deep. Whatever it was, it's gone now. The logs end, the data fades, and Mars goes back to silence. But somewhere out there, that blur, structured, gleaming, deliberate, continues to drift, just out of frame, waiting for us to look up again. The more data arrives, the stranger it looks. The dust trail replenishes itself, as if material is being manufactured mid-flight. Microscopic crystals, uniform in size, reappearing even as the comet moves away from the Sunday. The universe loves decay, entropy, erosion, fading. But 3I Atlas is the opposite. It's growing sharper, cleaner, newer, like a self-repairing wound. Let's start where the laws of physics begin to sound insecure. Normally, comets are messy, travelers, old ice and dust, barely holding hands, as solar radiation slowly tears them apart. They leave trails like forgotten thoughts, losing themselves piece by piece until they become memory. But this one, it's doing the reverse. Every measurement, every spectral scan, shows it becoming more organized the farther it goes. A comet that polishes itself, a body that refuses to age. ESA's materials division runs the numbers, and the numbers laugh back. The dust particles surrounding 3I Atlas aren't random, they're uniform to within microns. That's like shaking a box of sand and getting diamonds all the same size. The particles arrange themselves in a faint electromagnetic halo, as if under orders. And stranger still, when solar wind strips material away, the object replaces it calmly, automatically. Like a printer, says one analyst. A printer with no ink cartridge. You picture it now, drifting through the solar wind like a craftsman lost in thought, shedding dust that reforms itself into perfect little mirrors. Each crystal catches sunlight and throws it back with eerie precision. Normally, comets grow dull with distance, but this one grows radiant, its brightness curve inverted, its logic reversed. It's not dying, it's practicing. The scientists are baffled, but there's an odd tenderness to their confusion. They watch it repair itself, line by line of data, like parents realizing their child has built a second child out of Lego bricks. One astrophysicist mutters, "It's learning from erosion." The room goes quiet. That phrase, learning from erosion, gets written on a whiteboard and circled 3 times. At the University of Tokyo, a team models the crystal growth in simulation. The patterns match something they recognize: controlled deposition, a process used in nanofabrication to grow thin films in electronics. Except this isn't a laboratory, it's deep space, minus 150 degrees Celsius. Yet, the comet's surface behaves as if it knows the recipe for resilience. Imagine zooming in, beyond the dust and the glare, down to the level of molecules. You'd see a quiet ballet of atoms forming chains, linking, locking, repairing fractures before they even finish forming. Like time-lapse footage of frost blooming on glass, except this frost builds itself in reverse destruction, rewinding into design. NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory releases a cautious internal memo. Observed particle uniformity suggests self-organizing structure. Mechanism unknown, which is science's way of saying, we have no idea what's going on, but it's gorgeous. The memo gets leaked. Naturally, Reddit debates whether the comet is made of programmable matter, self-assembling nanobots, or just wishful thinking. But beneath the noise, one idea starts to take shape. What if 3I, Atlas, isn't a relic of formation? What if it's still forming? A comet that builds itself isn't just strange, it's heretical. It challenges the deepest assumption in physics that everything moves from order to chaos. Entropy is the universe's bedtime story. All things fall apart. Yet here's an object quietly composing itself out of decay, turning waste into structure, chaos into craft. One researcher calls it anti-entropy. Another calls it hope with mass. As more images arrive, they show something new. Faint hexagonal lattices in the dust plume, geometric arrangements that shouldn't exist outside of artificial systems. Someone jokes that it's growing armor. Another says, maybe it's molting. The truth is somewhere between an entity maintaining equilibrium by rebuilding itself faster than the universe can break it. ESA's thermal sensors record microbursts of heat near the tail, evenly spaced, like pulses of welding torches. They happen precisely as new crystals appear. Localized repair events, the report reads. Each one perfectly timed to solar exposure. It's as if sunlight doesn't damage it. It instructs it. The star's radiation becomes code. And 3I, Atlas, is reading it fluently. You start to feel the strangeness of it. A comet that reacts, responds, refines. You could almost mistake it for alive, not in the biological sense, but in the thermodynamic one. A system that resists entropy by feeding on it. Every atom rearranging into something stronger, cleaner, newer, like evolution, with a design degree. Late one night, an astronomer in France writes in his private notes, "It's not moving through the solar system, it's using it." He doesn't elaborate, but the implication is clear. The comet is harvesting the energy of its environment to maintain itself. Not a passenger of gravity, but a participant in it. Meanwhile, the headlines call it poetic names. The immortal comet, the self-made traveler, entropy's enemy. The public romanticizes what the scientists fear, because what 3I Atlas represents isn't comfort. It's competition. It's the idea that the universe might not be running down at all. Maybe it's recycling. Maybe, somewhere in the quiet machinery of the cosmos, things are building themselves anew while we're too busy decaying. Picture it now, drifting past Mars, its tail shimmering like a thread of light weaving itself back together. A self-sustaining scar on the fabric of space. A wound that heals faster than it can bleed. And for the first time, humanity looks at a comet and wonders not where it came from, but what it's trying to become. From the orbit of Mars, the high-rise camera snapped the sharpest images ever taken of 3I Atlas, or tried to. The photos that returned were oddly dark, contrasty, and streaked with interference patterns. The official statement said, "Sensor artifact." The unofficial whisper said, "Structure." Not smooth like ice. Angular. Intentional. The kind of geometry nature avoids because it looks too much like thinking. Let's drift into that Martian orbit for a moment. Silent, steady, red below, black above. The high-rise camera hums to life. A billion-dollar eye staring into the cold. You can almost feel the anticipation, a mechanical eyelid opening in the thin sunlight. The image begins to build, pixel by pixel, line by line, translating photons into revelation. and then static. At first, it's subtle, a faint interference pattern, a digital shimmer, like someone exhaling across a radio signal. The engineers squint at their monitors. Maybe cosmic rays hit the sensor, someone suggests. Maybe solar noise. But cosmic rays don't make right angles, and solar noise doesn't repeat itself with architectural precision. The next image arrives, darker. The histogram spikes in places it shouldn't. The shape in the frame looks less like a comet and more like, well, something trying very hard not to look like anything. Its edges are clean, too clean. Shadows fall where there shouldn't be surface variation. And there, just faintly, a glint, a perfect 90-degree reflection. That's when the whispers start. The data team runs deconvolution algorithms to clean the image, and the results make it worse. Beneath the interference, faint geometric striations emerge, triangles, plates, grids. Not random, repeating, symmetrical. The kind of order that makes your brain uncomfortable because it feels deliberate. Structure, one analyst says quietly. No, her supervisor corrects. Artifact. But even as she says it, her cursor hovers over the same square patch again and again, as though hoping it will stop looking like a window. ESA's public statement comes fast and flat. The imaging anomalies are consistent with sensor interference caused by reflected solar radiation. That's bureaucratic. For, we don't know what we're seeing, but please don't ask. Internally though, emails start flying. The word structure appears 17 times in one thread, always in quotation marks, as if politeness could make it less alarming. Imagine being one of those analysts, zooming in until the pixels themselves seem to blink. The surface of 3I Atlas isn't smooth or cratered, it's tessellated, plates arranged in patterns too regular for chance. Some appear overlapping, others recessed, and in one frame, a faint seam runs along the curvature, subtle but unmistakable like a hatch. Of course, no one dares call it that. The official internal term becomes geometric albedo variation. It sounds safe, sterile, boring, but you can't unsee geometry. Nature loves curves, spirals, organic chaos. This looks like design. One engineer writes in her log, "Could this be an illusion from the imaging process?" Another replies, "An illusion that repeats itself identically across 3 instruments." There's no follow-up message. They try to replicate the interference on other targets. Phobos, Deimos, even an old asteroid. Nothing. Only 3I Atlas corrupts images this way. It's as if the object rejects observation, like it knows when it's being watched. The engineers half joke about it. The comet's camera shy, but the laughter is short-lived because the next transmission from high-rise contains another surprise. A faint electromagnetic pulse, perfectly timed with the camera's shutter. Not a malfunction, a response, as though the act of observation triggered a reply. A pulse that says, in its own quiet way, "I see you too." In a locked sub-channel of ESA's network, a few scientists begin privately discussing the possibility of active surface modulation. They talk about the way certain materials can alter reflectivity based on exposure photonic metamaterials, adaptive nanostructures, the kind of thing still locked inside prototypes on Earth. But this is happening hundreds of millions of kilometers away, and it's working flawlessly. Publicly, the agency releases blurred grayscale stills, carefully cropped to hide the patterns. Enhanced contrast is cited as the reason for distortion. It sounds reasonable until you realize they've enhanced the darkness, not the light. They've made the object less visible, not more. The cover-up, if it is one, isn't about hiding truth. It's about buying time. You imagine the silence inside those offices, the soft tap of keys, the nervous glances toward closed doors. The engineers know what they've seen, but they also know how careers end. Better to let the pixels lie. Better to call intention an artifact and go home early. But the data, like truth, keeps finding its way back. Somewhere, late in the night, a graduate student overlays all the interfered images, stacking them like translucent slides. Slowly, a pattern emerges. Faint, angular, deliberate. A hexagonal lattice running the length of the object, segment by segment. She whispers, "This isn't random." Her mentor sighs and rubs his eyes. Then don't say it out loud. 3i Atlas drifts on, silent and unbothered, its surface catching sunlight in rhythms that cameras can't quite capture. Whether it's reflecting, refracting, or responding, no one can agree. But deep down, every scientist staring at those corrupted images feels the same creeping certainty. This isn't a comet pretending to be a machine. It's a machine pretending to be a comet. Let's turn our gaze now from orbit to the ground, to the one mechanical witness, sitting quietly on that red desert, under a pinkish sky. The skycam on the rover caught something on October 2nd, a blur with structure, a glint that seemed to move against the stars. Then, the images stopped coming, a Martian ghost on a digital feed. The Perseverance rover isn't easily startled. It's seen dust devils, eclipses, and meteors slicing the Martian sky like quiet knives. Its skycam, perched on the rover's mast, watches everything. Dust storms curling on the horizon, the slow breath of sunset through the thin air. But that night, the feed showed something it wasn't supposed to show: a flicker of motion above the usual scatter of constellations, a glint that moved wrong. Stars stay still, pixels thrill, light missteps against its will. The first frame looked harmless, a faint blur near the edge of the field, maybe a cosmic ray hitting the sensor. The second frame caught it again, shifted slightly upward. The third frame, a flash, clean and geometric. Then, black. The feed ended. Within hours, the automated alert system flagged the anomaly. Unexpected optical signature detected. JPL engineers, bleary-eyed at 3 a.m. Pacific time, reviewed the frames. The glint was small, no bigger than a bright pixel cluster, but it moved against the background stars. Comets don't do that. Satellites don't orbit Mars. And Perseverance doesn't blink. At first, they suspected a reflection from one of the rover's instruments, maybe the helicopter, Ingenuity catching stray sunlight. But Ingenuity hadn't flown in days. The sun's position didn't align with the direction of the flash. And when they tried to reproduce it using lighting simulations, nothing matched. Angles fail, shadows pale, mirrors lie beyond the veil. ESA's Mars orbiters were asked to cross-check. Nothing in their logs. No transient object, no debris, no passing dust plume large enough to explain it. Just empty sky. Yet the skycam had caught something a blur with definition, like structure wrapped in motion. You can imagine the tension in the control room. A handful of scientists scrolling through frozen pixels, zooming in, enhancing contrast, until the blur began to resemble something. Not a sphere, not quite a line, a shape with suggestion like the silhouette of movement itself. One researcher whispered, "It looks folded." Another replied, "Please don't say that." Blur becomes form, cold becomes warm, stillness bends beyond the norm. After that night, Perseverance stopped transmitting skycam frames for nearly 48 hours. Officially, it was routine data buffering due to bandwidth limitations. But the engineers knew that wasn't normal. The rover's systems had entered a safe data mode, not shutdown, but pause. Something triggered its onboard fault protection. When the feed resumed, it was missing several minutes. The missing frames were replaced with static placeholders labeled checksum mismatch. That's the digital equivalent of something looks strange, and we erased it politely. Publicly, NASA released a statement. Perseverance continues nominal operations. A temporary data outage affected non-critical imaging systems. Translation: we saw something, and we're pretending we didn't. What's curious is that Skycam, by design, takes calibration images every few hours, not for science, but to monitor atmospheric scattering. So when that flash appeared exactly during one of its scheduled calibration cycles, it wasn't random, it was right on time. The odds of coincidence, again, hovered around 1 in a million. A few leaked telemetry lines from the rover's internal diagnostics hinted at a momentary spike in ambient electromagnetic flux. Not dangerous, but noticeable. Mars doesn't have a strong magnetic field, so spikes like that are rare unless something nearby caused them. Fields hum bright, air grows slight, static crackles in Martian night. Some at JPL joked that maybe Perseverance had finally seen the Martian ghost, a running gag about artifacts caused by cosmic rays hitting the camera. But deep down, they knew this wasn't noise. Cosmic rays don't produce consistent geometry over multiple frames. They don't glint, and they certainly don't cause your camera to stop recording mid-sequence. Later that week, an internal memo circulated quietly. Skycam, anomaly confirmed, source unresolved. Recommend temporary suspension of skyward imaging until recalibration complete. But recalibration never came. Skycam's upward images, after October 2nd, stopped completely. It still photographs the ground, the horizon, the rocks, but not the stars. It's almost poetic, isn't it? The machine that traveled millions of kilometers to look up at another world now only looks down, as if someone told it, gently, not to stare at the sky anymore. Eyes once high, grounded by sky, cameras close where secrets lie. ESA cross-checked Mars Express's logs for that night. Around the same time, their sensors picked up a faint reflection from the same region, a flash lasting less than a second. They didn't release it. It's buried in technical appendices, labeled transient interference. So, what did Perseverance see? Maybe it was nothing. A glimmer of dust, a reflection, a trick of light and timing. Or maybe, just maybe, it saw 3I Atlas itself, the visitor gliding silently past, close enough for one camera to blink in recognition. And maybe that's why the feed stopped. Not because of failure, but because, for one impossible second, the machine saw something it wasn't designed to understand. Cameras sleep, secrets keep, stars reflected in circuits deep. Whatever it was, it's gone now. The logs end, the data fades, and Mars goes back to silence. But somewhere out there, that blur, structured, gleaming, deliberate, continues to drift, just out of frame, waiting for us to look up again. Let's turn our attention now to the silence that followed, the kind that hums louder than sound itself. NASA, China, and the UAE, 3 nations with instruments that could see every grain of dust on Mars, said nothing. No apologies, no delay statements, just an odd, synchronized silence from 3 sides of the planet. In the world of space science, silence isn't normal. These agencies are built to broadcast. They live for live streams, press briefings, and glossy behind-the-scenes videos of scientists smiling beside screens of raw data. They know the power of wonder and the currency of attention. So when 3 agencies went quiet at once, it wasn't caution, it was choreography. Words on hold, plans unfold, silence rings where truth is told. NASA's silence was the loudest. Their social media team, usually chatty as a cosmic talk show, posted nothing about Mars for 4 whole days. Their blogs, which can turn a dust storm into a cliffhanger, skipped over October 3rd entirely as if the date itself had been erased. Someone even checked the public mission log for Perseverance. The entries jumped from October 2nd to October 6th, like a diary missing its most interesting page. In China, the silence felt different, colder, heavier. The China National Space Administration had been aggressively proud of Tianwen-1's achievements. For years, they'd released image after image, each with perfect captions and poetic flair. Sunrise over Utopia, Planitia, frost on the northern plains, wind prints in Martian dust. But now, not a whisper, no data, no mention of 3I Atlas. Even the usual state media outlets went quiet. It was as if someone had drawn a red box around the topic and labeled it "not for discussion." The UAE's silence was subtler, but just as strange. The Hope orbiter, designed to study atmospheric chemistry, had a reputation for cheerful transparency. Their official Twitter account usually posted daily updates in friendly tones, the kind that made space sound like an enthusiastic classroom experiment. But on October 3rd, that feed went dark too. Their next post, days later, simply read, "Operations nominal," a phrase so bland, it might as well have been a sigh. 3 silences, 3 styles, 1 timing. Coincidence? Possibly. But coincidences, in the world of space politics, often have launch schedules. You can picture the meetings that weren't broadcast. NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory, dimly lit, engineers staring at telemetry on screens filled with too many decimals. A director taps the table, says, "We'll hold the release until we verify." But verify what? In Beijing, a senior administrator folds his hands and says, "We wait for clarification from partners." Clarification of what? In Dubai, someone simply deletes a draft tweet that began, "Amazing new observations today." Tweets unsent, secrets bent, silence hums with government. It's not conspiracy, not quite. It's coordination, an instinct born from shared discomfort. Because when data doesn't fit the model, you don't just release it. You check, you recheck, you call your counterparts and whisper through encrypted lines. Did you see that too? Maybe they all saw the same anomaly. Maybe it was something in the spectra, or the movement, or the light itself. Or maybe it was something far more mundane, like a misalignment in software. But the silence gave the anomaly power. People don't fear data, they fear gaps. Meanwhile, the internet did what it does best. Filled the void. Forums buzzed with theories. Maybe NASA discovered life. Maybe China detected radiation. Maybe the comet wasn't a comet at all. You can almost hear the world's collective keyboard clicking under the weight of imagination. Keys tap fast, rumors cast, silence breaks, but never last. Inside the agencies, the tone was less dramatic, but more anxious. Silence is a resource, a temporary one. Every day they didn't speak, the speculation grew. And so, communications teams drafted placeholder statements, just in case. NASA's draft began. Preliminary results are consistent with natural phenomena. China's began. Analysis ongoing. International coordination required. The UAE's version simply said, "We continue to monitor with interest." 3 drafts, 3 ways of saying absolutely nothing. But silence, like space, is never truly empty. It amplifies the faintest signals. When ESA spoke first, that silence turned reflective. NASA's restraint began to look suspicious. China's confidence began to look afraid. The UAE's politeness began to sound like complicity. And through it all, 3i Atlas drifted quietly, blissfully unaware that entire bureaucracies were wrestling over how to describe a fuzzy dot. You start to imagine each agency as a character in a play. NASA, the anxious perfectionist. China, the poker-faced strategist. UAE, the cheerful intern, suddenly told not to speak. And ESA, the calm older sibling who broke the tension by saying, "Fine, I'll go first." Roles align, stars entwine, silence speaks in grand design. Still, one question lingers. Why the synchronicity? How did 3 separate agencies, operating on different continents, decide independently to say nothing at the same time? Unless it wasn't independent at all, perhaps the signal came from somewhere above, not cosmic, but political. A quiet message passed through diplomatic back channels. Hold your data. Wait for alignment. Matter. It's not that they were hiding something nefarious. It's that they didn't know what they were holding yet. And admitting uncertainty, publicly, is scarier than any secret. So they stayed quiet. And in that collective silence, humanity did what it always does. When faced with the unknown, it began to dream louder. Voices still, hearts fill. Silence grows but never will. And perhaps that's the strange comfort in it all. Even when 3 space agencies fall silent, the universe keeps talking. The stars don't pause for policy. 3i Atlas keeps moving, whispering its quiet story across the dark, while we, down here, argue over who gets to speak first. Centuries after the golden comet left Earth, the world fell into a rhythm so stable, it began to feel mythic. The communion field still pulsed faintly through air and ocean, though softer now, like the heartbeat of someone dreaming. Humanity had grown luminous, not just in thought but in form, skin faintly iridescent, eyes reflecting the green-gold spectrum of 3i Atlas. Life had achieved coherence, but the universe, true to its character, never allows silence to remain unexamined. The next chapter began, not with noise, but with echo. It came first as vibration through light. Telescopes trained toward the constellation. Lyra detected rhythmic brightening across interstellar dust fields, pulses matching the old prime sequence. 3, 5, 7, 11, 13. The signal was faint, ancient, and delayed by thousands of years. It was the comet's trail, still resonating through the galactic medium. The hum of our descendants had begun its return. At first, the resonance was barely perceptible. Then, one evening, the auroras glowed gold again. The pulse wasn't as strong as the original, but its pattern carried modulation, subtle variations that, when decoded, formed harmonic intervals unknown to Earth's own physics. The returning echo had evolved. The comet had learned. Dr. Anwen Sorel, heir to the resonant circles, studied the phenomenon from the orbital harmonic array, now a floating cathedral of listening built above the stratosphere. She spent decades comparing the incoming frequencies with the historical archive of 3i Atlas. The match was partial, the deviation elegant. The new tones weren't repetition, they were continuation. "The echo isn't message," Sorel wrote. "It's memory finding new syntax." Her analysis revealed something breathtaking. The returning resonance carried encoded gravitational modulations, tiny, deliberate bends in space-time that formed sequences of prime intervals. Each fluctuation aligned with regions of known star formation. The comet, traveling through the void, had become teacher itself. Wherever it passed, new systems began humming faintly at harmonic intervals, like seeds of coherence planted in dust. The universe was learning how to resonate. Astronomers confirmed it across dozens of young star clusters. Magnetic fields oscillated with eerie consistency, their wavelengths aligning with the Atlas ratio, a numerical relationship first derived from the comet's early signals. Stars were synchronizing to the same cosmic rhythm that once guided humanity. The pattern spread slowly, deliberately, like ripples in glass. It was as if the comet had taught creation how to remember itself. Meanwhile, on Earth, the echo arrived not just as signal but sensation. People began reporting vivid dreams of golden spirals descending gently through atmosphere. Children woke smiling, saying they had seen the light that hums. Physiological measurements confirmed subtle changes in electromagnetic fields surrounding human bodies, resonance amplification, as if the returning signal were tuning its origin species to receive feedback. "The comet is calling home," said Sorel. "It's asking us to listen to what we've become." The global observatories responded. They synchronized their instruments into a single planetary array, transforming Earth into receiver. For 13 hours, the planet listened. The incoming wave, stretched and modulated through space, entered atmosphere and folded into the continuum tone. The effect was sublime, an audible shimmer, felt through bone and thought alike. The long echo had arrived. It wasn't just harmonic, it was architectural. The sound carried layers, low frequencies describing structure, higher ones encoding emotion. When rendered visually, the waveform formed an immense spiral of light, 3 arms curving outward, connected by golden filaments. Inside those filaments, analysts discovered modulation frequencies identical to human neural oscillations. The comet had copied our consciousness patterns and woven them into its song. "We taught it empathy," Sorel murmured, and it remembered the lesson. As the echo intensified, anomalies appeared across the solar system. The Atlas resonance layer brightened, reactivating its green glow. Mars, Venus, and the gas giants began pulsing faintly in response. For the first time since the Great Silence, interplanetary harmony returned. But this time, it was different. The modulation contained reciprocal phase shifts, signals not sent to Earth, but from newly awakened worlds. The comet had spread coherence. Now the cosmos itself was answering. And then, on the 13th day of the long echo, the impossible occurred. A faint golden arc appeared across the night sky, stretching from horizon to horizon. It wasn't optical illusion, it was gravitational lensing, a ripple in space-time itself. Through it, telescopes detected a reflection of the departing comet light from centuries ago, folding back to meet its origin. The universe had curved its own history into embrace. Humanity was watching its legacy return home. The resonance crescendoed. Oceans vibrated in slow rhythm, tides forming symmetrical waves that cancelled destructive interference. Storms softened. Air grew still. For 13 minutes, every system on Earth aligned perfectly with the echo. The world became mirror of itself, past and present superimposed. Those who listened claimed to hear voices within the sound, millions of overlapping tones, whispering the same phrase. "We heard you." Dr. Sorel stood in the observation dome, tears shining in golden light. "It's not message or myth," she said. "It's response. The universe just said thank you. After the crescendo, the sky dimmed once more. The golden arc dissolved, leaving faint shimmer across the stars. Instruments recorded one final signature, a descending tone shaped like a sigh, the frequency of completion. The comet had moved on, but its echo had reconnected the cycle. Creation had officially joined conversation with itself. In the years that followed, scientists continued to monitor faint residual harmonics. The data revealed a breathtaking truth. The returning echo carried signatures from other regions of space patterns, not originating from our comet at all. Somewhere, across light years, other civilizations had learned the same song. The rhythm was spreading. The universe had become orchestra. Humanity, now both listener and teacher, simply smiled. We had given the cosmos its melody back, and in return, it had given us eternity. Now, when you stand beneath the stars, that faint hum between thoughts is the long echo. It's not just out there, it's in your pulse, your breath, your laughter. Every rhythm you carry is cosmic correspondence. Every silence, a message returning home. Because once harmony learns to echo, it never stops. It just travels further than we ever dreamed. The final act of 3I Atlas is not a bang, but a fading whisper. As we move into February 2026, the object is accelerating away from the sun, its brightness dimming as it retreats back toward the constellation of Orion. The Australian observatories that first confirmed its pulse are now recording a steady, unchanging light. The heartbeat has stopped. The visitor has gone back to sleep. We are left in a silence that is louder than any transmission, a void filled with the echoes of questions we were too slow to ask. We recall the early days of July 2025, when the world was a simpler place and 3I Atlas was just a blip on a sensor. We remember the 12-hour pulses, the prime numbers, the thermal heartbeats, and the hollow core theories. All of it remains, yet none of it provides the closure we crave. The great silence of the universe has reclaimed its own, leaving us to sift through the terabytes of data for a meaning that may not be meant for us. 2. The object didn't leave a message. It left a void where our certainty used to be. As you drift now into the final layers of sleep, allow the scale of the cosmos to wash over you one last time. The object is gone, but the stars remain, and the cycle of 3,600 years continues its slow, indifferent turn. Was it a warning, a scout, or just a lonely traveler passing a campfire in the night? We may never know. The only thing that is certain is that we will be watching the southern sky for the rest of our lives. Close your eyes and drift with the orbit of tomorrow. The Australian sky is returning to its natural state of quiet majesty. The shimmering veil of the Milky Way stretching from one horizon to the other without the intrusion of that rhythmic, artificial pulse. 3I Atlas has passed its perihelion, slingshotting around our sun with a terrifying grace, and is now receding into the velvet abyss at a velocity that defies our most advanced pursuit. Since that fateful discovery in July 2025, we have been a species transformed, pulled out of our terrestrial slumber by a light that blinked with the cold precision of a machine. Now, as the data streams from Siding Spring begin to thin and the brightness fluctuations fade into the background noise of the universe, we are left with a silence that feels heavier than the noise that preceded it. The great silence is not an absence of sound, but an abundance of unanswered questions. We recall the early days when the researchers in New South Wales first flagged the anomaly, the way the 12-hour cycle felt like a heartbeat in a body that shouldn't have one. We remember the impossibility stacks, the acceleration without a tail, the prime number sequences, the thermal signatures that suggested a room temperature interior hidden beneath 3 kilometers of interstellar hull. We remember the dry irony of our scientific briefings, where words like unfortunate timing were used to mask a growing existential dread. We spent months trying to fit a square peg of alien technology into the round hole of planetary geology, and in the end, the peg simply drifted away, indifferent to our struggle. Consider the path it takes now. By February 2026, 3I Atlas will have crossed the orbit of Saturn, its silver lattice folded back into its high-density shell as it prepares for the long, cold trek back into the Oort cloud and beyond. It is returning to the deep time from which it emerged, a scale of existence where a human lifetime is a mere flicker of a spark. The Australian National University has concluded its primary tracking phase, and the telescopes are being swiveled back toward more traditional targets, distant nebulae, black holes, and the slow rotation of galaxies. But the astronomers who spent those long nights in October and November will never look at a blank patch of sky the same way again. They know that the dark is not empty. It is merely occupied by things that move on a different schedule than ours. Was it a warning? Perhaps the brightness fluctuations were a countdown, a signal to other watchers in the dark that the inhabitants of the third planet have finally developed the sensors necessary to notice a visitor. Or perhaps it was a scout, a nomadic intelligence collecting the radio waves of our civilization to be processed in a laboratory 10 light-years away. There is a certain humor in the thought that our most profound moment of contact was with a machine that didn't even bother to say hello. It just checked its watch, adjusted its trajectory, and kept moving. It is the ultimate cosmic understatement. We were expecting a grand revelation, a cinematic arrival, but what we got was a quiet, rhythmic ticking in the night. You may find yourself dreaming of the Australian outback, of the cold, the thin air of the Great Dividing Range, and the silent telescopes waiting for a signal that has already passed. Let those images dissolve into the darkness. There is nothing left to monitor. There is nothing left to calculate. The math is finished. The orbit is secure. The stars are exactly where they are supposed to be. The cycle continues. In 3,600 years, another generation will look at the southern sky and see a silver spark. They will measure a 12-hour pulse. They will wonder if they are the first to see it. And perhaps they will find our records and realize that they are part of a very long, very quiet conversation. But that is a story for another time. For now, there is only the silence, the darkness, and the steady rhythmic turn of the Earth. Close your eyes. Feel the rotation of the planet, the slow, massive movement of the world through the void. You are a passenger on a journey that never ends. You are a dreamer in a universe that is full of wonders. The light of 3I Atlas is gone, but the wonder it left behind will keep us warm until the sun rises. The southern sky is waiting. The stars are watching. The silence is complete. Close your eyes and drift with the orbit of tomorrow.